Yeah, I wanted to share with you guys my justice journey. Being a pastor in the church, it's now very, very interested in, very invested in societal transformation and this whole big idea of what kingdom justice is. Yeah, in the early days for me, I was Bethel's outreach pastor, so I was actually the guy that actually started and pioneered Bethel's outreach ministries, something that I think Bethel's become pretty well known for: walking the streets, healing the sick, seeing people delivered, seeing people get saved. Like, evangelism was just like a huge part of my norm and a huge part of my rhythm. It was definitely the lens that my whole life was under the influence of. And that really came out of just a really simple idea of, I'm alive to follow Jesus. I'm alive to do what he's asking me to do. I'm alive to follow his lead. And in those early days, there was this very simple invitation to just get out of the church, to get into culture. And again, in that setting, that really looked like praying for the sick. It looked like leading people to the Lord. It looked like words of knowledge for healing. It was very much that naturally supernatural lifestyle. And, just so many stories of seeing people encounter the love of God and seeing people find Jesus, get delivered of demons, being delivered of drug addiction. And in that season, it was inevitable that we were walking the streets of our community. Be pretty normal. I'd just be in prayer in the secret place, and the Lord would kind of highlight an area of our town. And again, as a follower of Jesus, it's very normal and natural for me to go where he's leading, to not kind of sit on those leanings or feelings or impulses, but to take action with those impulses. And so I remember in the early days being in the prayer house. And when I say early days, I feel like this is probably 98, maybe 99, 2000, somewhere around there. And just seeing a particular neighborhood in our community, and I just saw myself walking the streets in that area. And so I'm like, oh, good. I got up, got out of the prayer house, hopped in my car, drove to that particular neighborhood, and I was just walking the streets of that area, praying, asking the Lord for connections and favor, and kind of the rest is history, because that became the first neighborhood in Redding that we kind of pioneered doing what we call neighborhood impact, where we're just showing up with the love of God, sharing the good news of the gospel, praying for people's needs, but doing that in a way that was very long term. Like, we're showing up minimum on a weekly basis, connecting with families in their living room, sitting with them, doing life, building relationship. And again, in that season, amazing to see the supernatural, amazing to see the power of God come, seeing people's bodies healed, seeing people get delivered of real addictions. But in that space, it was very, very obvious that praying a prayer for salvation, while that was a massive point of transformation, wasn't the end of the story. Like, in that season, as an outreach pastor, as a guy that was in charge of essentially getting the church out of the church and into the community, we found out really quickly, it didn't take long, that transformation as a holistic reality takes time, and it takes multiple resources, multiple relationships being leveraged. Very quickly, I was working with so many people caught in poverty cycles, caught in drug addictive cycles, caught in, real world problems. I found out very fast, man, I need help. Like, I need collaboration, I need cooperation, I need partnerships. And so we started building bridges with the social service community, started building bridges with local government, started building bridges with law enforcement. And again, that season was just a beautiful season of seeing the gospel manifest in real ways where lives are absolutely being transformed. But again, there was this inevitability of, okay, somebody praying a prayer, there's probably more that needs to be going on than just that prayer being prayed. So cut to the chase, and in a more recent season, my wife and I were just praying about direction and future and asking the Lord about what his emphasis was for us. We were in a season of transition, actually coming back into the Bethel environment after pastoring a church in another community for a few years. And as we came back into the Redding landscape, the Bethel landscape, was just asking the Lord, like, what are you doing? What's your highlight? What's your focus? As we do, as Jesus followers, we're actually doing what he's asking us to do, not just doing our own thing. And we had a dream in that season, a really significant dream that ended up setting a real marker for us in terms of our focus. And in the dream, a nurse came to my wife and I, handed us a baby. The baby looked exactly like me. My wife said, "Oh, it's our son," and she began to call that person by a name that we had a promise of in an earlier season of having a son. And so she called the boy by that name. The nurse immediately interrupted my wife, "No, that is not his name. His name is Justice." And she looked right through us with just this like passion and this conviction. His name is Justice. And we just knew immediately, like, oh, this is what the Lord's been speaking to us about justice in the church, and this new move that God would be initiating in the body of Christ to do something, again, in a holistic way. Not the church being separate from the needs of culture, not the church being overly or solely focused on personal growth and development and Christian maturity, but how the church would equip the saints to be invested in societal transformation, invested in spaces of culture where there's real human suffering, and showing up in those spaces with solution that brings strength, solution that brings transformation, solution that brings healing, and again, solution that's very holistic. So we just kind of started, digging and mining in that space. Like, what does justice look like in the current context? Lord, what are you doing? And we just started to bump into leader after leader after leader that was so turned on and so inspired by men like Martin Luther King Jr., who as a pastor, saw a social injustice in his generation, or saw a social ill or ail, and was extremely compelled to be invested in that space of social need, to show up with the love and power of God in such a way that holistic transformation would manifest or would ensue. And, obviously a long journey that MLK engaged in. And for us as individual leaders in the body of Christ, like, we continually bump into new leaders, leader after leader after leader, who are saying yes to the call of the Father to be an answer to human suffering in their generation. Friends we want to highlight, because as Justice Collective, we feel very interested and very inspired in the space of something that is a collective. How can we champion each other's works? How can we support each other in this mission of bringing kingdom justice into the spaces of human need? So started to bump into particular leaders, friends of ours now, people that we're very close to, that are very active in conflict zones, that are very invested in seeing poverty cycles broken, that are very consistent to address the issue of fatherlessness in our generation, that are completely sold out to make a difference in that space of immigration and the refugee crisis that's current. Human trafficking needs, again, there's so much that we would say, wow, the Lord has an answer for that. And at the end of the day, as a pastor, as a believer in the supernatural, as somebody who's following Jesus, I know that justice is on the heart of God, because I know that justice it's the righting of every wrong that humans endure or that are put upon them. It's the very simplicity of the gospel that says God is love, and where people are not experiencing his love, God has an answer for that. So it's just been an amazing journey to be invested in these spaces, both in my town here locally with local initiatives we run, but also in championing and supporting other leaders around the world that are very invested in their locales, bringing support to them, helping their voice shine on our platform. And again, everywhere we go, we just see people being inspired to do likewise, to be invested in culture, to be an answer to the problems that we're seeing in our generation.